important.
Thanks.
Thank you. We'll talk at the end about what that means and how we want to deal with the recording. Okay, so this is in the book. And this one here is the main, the standard style of expressing ideas in Western, in at least British and American culture. Not so much British, but American. What some people call the Industrial Growth Society, or whatever. I'm gonna get rid of this box here. Okay, so there's one main idea linking things, and maybe there are, yeah, there definitely are branch ideas. Yes, thank you, page 91. Branch ideas to this. But so when we're dealing with all our messy thinking at the beginning, we're trying to look for the main idea that holds things together, that can be the axis for this writing. And then we're looking for exemplification, details, side issues, but they all have to fit together with this one thing. And that's one of the big struggles, because nobody really thinks that way. But there are a lot of reasons in that I've verified through looking at studies about how readers read, how readers interpret, that back this up. There's a reason for that. The reason, and so what I'm going to say is that these, even though this is a very, I would say, this is something that comes out of colonial culture in a way. It is something that fits with literacy and reading, because when people read, they need to hear the main idea first in order to understand how the different pieces fit into that main idea. And there's a lot of research about this that's really interesting, has been around for a while. So that, but anyway, that's that method. But here are all these other rich methods of time-honored methods of thinking and also writing from other cultures. And this second one here is, and I, gosh, in this moment of where in history where we have so much, it's so easy to stereotype and marginalize ways of thinking that are not mainstream ways of thinking. I'm only presenting these because they've helped people straighten out or figure out why they were having difficulties in the past. People from other cultures whose cultures value different ways of thinking. And no matter what culture you see yourself from, you probably have elements of all these in your styles of thinking. So this one here, it is very, this comes, by the way, from a style of research called contrastive rhetoric that has been questioned, and but I found that these very, very useful in working with people from other cultures. So this one is from, sorry, oh, I was a little flustered from that Zoom stuff. I'm really sorry. I'm trying to be clear and brief here. This one is from Romance languages, people from who speak Spanish or French as a native language are much less likely to go straight to the point. It's considered beautiful to go off the point and make digressions and tell stories that don't seem to really be connected to the main point, but we're telling them anyway. And then at the end, there's kind of a main point. So those are two different, very different ways of thinking expression that just rooted in the culture. This one is what the contrastive rhetoric people came up with for Asian cultures. And there are so many Asian cultures, I don't know if this is appropriate for all of them. I also found that it was the way that 14th century English poets thought. So it's not a limited thing. So this one is, and you may recognize this from your own tendencies, whether you're Asian or not. This one is you, but it's very deliberate in erudite, literate Asian culture. Don't ever state the main point. Just in suggest it, suggest it, suggest it, but don't be direct. Be very indirect. Go right around, and then in the middle, by the time you get into the middle, you don't have to make a point because everybody has understood it because of all the nuances. I'm really rushing through this. This one is totally fascinating. And I had experience working with an Egyptian student who had I wrote about it in the book, I think, had a great aha moment when I showed her this diagram, because this was how she had been writing. This is how we do it. We make a point, we make another point, we make another point, we make another point. We do not connect the points. We expect our readers, our audience, of course, everyone understands the connection between points. So we just make these points. We make them. We don't connect them. We wait for our audience, who are part of our culture, to understand the connections of the points. So that's why I have the dotted lines here. So that's a range of thinking patterns. I'm sure there are others. When I took my work to groups in South Africa and the Horn of Africa, after writing the book, people had said, "Well, where are we?" And they said they came up with something that sort of had arrows leading into a center, the idea of Ubuntu. So anyway, I'm not sure about all of this, but I wanted to bring this up because I think, and I think we could spend another 3 hours just on this from looking at your faces, because I can see a lot of a lot of insights popping out on this on your faces. Maybe we should spend a little time on this, but yeah, let's just have a moment to see what people are thinking about this, because we are in academia and we are writing for public audiences who, I mean, if you think academia is restrictive about this, try writing an op-ed column, which I also hope to talk about today, where you can have one point, and because readers are in a big hurry and they want to get the point and they want to be convinced. Um, if you're writing a memo in an office, you need to be very, very good at this. And they will think that even your academic style is kind of too wordy, um, too much information. I just need what I need to get to do my job. So this is worth. We should have started. Maybe we should have started the whole workshop with this. What do you think? Give me a little bit of feedback on this. I'll keep holding this up, or you can look on page 91.
I think it's fascinating. When I saw the diagrams, well, my mother tongue is Spanish, and I'm like, totally, that's a second. And it's just like a thing that I learned when I was finishing my PhD, writing my dissertation, what a core violation was, which is basically that you have the subject and the action. And in Spanish, they usually are so apart that when you get to the action, you totally forgot who you were talking about. And I'm like, oh yeah, I write like that all the time, but I never understood what was the problem in my academic writing. But yeah, it's totally like you have to describe the person and just say the word were they, and then you finally get to the point in which you like say what that person and the action of the subject. So yeah, it was just resonated. It's fascinating, and it's fascinating to think that we all try to fit in one type of academic writing, which is pretty much like English writing, and we struggle a lot, like trying to convey our forms of writing into this specific one way. So yeah, it was just fascinating.
It's fascinating. Yes. Oh, there are a lot of hands. I see. I'm going to call on Laura because she hasn't spoken to my ear yet.
Thank you, Louise. Yeah, I appreciate you kind of describing those diagrams for us and thinking styles. And I was thinking about like my own writing and how I guess it might be like a spiral because I write for my community, I write for my family. And even though it's like academic writing, I still kind of like, there's like a little refusal going on of like, I'm not going to write this way. I'm going to write, and I'm going to start with a context and a story that places my family and my kin and my community in it for them to even be interested in reading it. Because kind of like to start with the argument or the main point, I feel like it's something that would turn my people that I'm writing to off, that it's like might come off as presumptuous or kind of like a know-it-all. So I like try to like bring them into it and be like, we're sitting here together in this building and like folding chairs, and like place them in a place where they can see themselves in the writing. And then I sort of start to unfold what I'm trying to say. So I guess that might be kind of like a spiral. Yeah. So, and then I know like in my own writing, that's been one of the things that actually I was at a ACSP meeting, and it was like a book writing session, and I was asking a question and about writing and kind of approaches, and the guy went like this, and he said, you know what you get from that? A death spiral. And he went,
my God.
What did you show? I couldn't
it doesn't really show up, but he drew a spiral on a piece of paper and
Oh,
showed it to me. And he said, you know what you get with that? A death spiral. And then he like threw it down on the table. And then I was like, well, I don't really care. I'm still going to honor like the way that my audience needs to hear these concepts written. So
God.
yeah.
That wasn't that long ago, right? That was not that
No.
long ago.
No, this I'm so glad I brought this up. This is so important. Gosh, that story. Yeah, I don't know what to do about that except talk to you about it.
Lisa Bates would suggest that we go pee on that person.
Well, I think I am an optimist. And I think that there are ways to figure out how to do a both and. You know, I really think there are ways to figure out how to do a both and. Um, but it requires having being what somebody said at the beginning, you're straddling two cultures or more. And you need to be literate in both of those cultures, meaning you need to know how to communicate in both or all of those cultures and be able, I guess code switching is partly the term for it. I remember Elsie was saying at the beginning that she was finally at a stage in her career when she could be a storyteller and not and be a creative writer instead of being locking herself into various genres and forms. And this is a time when you can do that. But I think there are ways to integrate. I certainly noticed when I was following planning literature that there are ways to to code switch within a piece of writing. To start out, if it's for an academic audience mainly, you could start out with a small spiral and then put your nice, straightforward, wormy, this is what it's going to be about, and then do your, and do alternation. I've done that in the book that I've just written. I alternate between passages in italics, which are what the land says, and passages in regular font, which are what I've learned or figured out. So, I mean, there's ways to do that. Let's hear from, some people are backing off from their hand raising, but let's hear quickly from Teo and then Natalie. Teo, you started this off in a way, in my mind.
Thank you. Yeah, I find that actually I'm like always hybrid. And so like I will be combining different styles at once. And I don't know, sometimes people get it and sometimes people don't. And I think there's like a thing about the audience, right? And it is difficult because so sometimes I will try and write in a way that will make sense to people from here, right? Because I'm writing about culture and history and relations of this place in this place, right? And I have responsibilities also to the people and the history of this place.
Mm-hmm. I have experienced your being frozen here.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I'm not hearing all of what Teo has said. Teo, do you mind? Oh, now you're moving again. You're either your connection was a little different or something. I lost the end of
Oh,
what you were saying.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to
Yeah.
repeat it? Or did you get it?
Yeah, people, yes, because I think everyone.
Okay, so it's just that it's hard to honor the culture and history and people and place of Whenua Mauhi, and at the same time to like write in a way that is easy for my community to understand.
And rather than write two separate things, which you could do, would it be, or what are the ways to combine them? I think we need a whole workshop on that. And I wanted to plant the seed here as we go into the writing groups, because I've certainly found over the years that in free writing, in messy thinking, in all the thinking that goes into pulling ideas together for a draft, there's almost no one who writes in the colonial style. I mean, nobody thinks that way. Nobody really thinks that way. And as I said, there's plenty of research showing that you can. It's much easier to assimilate technical information and complex information for any reader from any culture. I think the research says if you follow these thinking guidelines to basically identify a main point. It doesn't have to be in a rude and arrogant way. And so that you probably all know about George Lakoff's work with cognitive, oh dear, I'm forgetting exactly what he calls it, but the framing idea that if there's a conceptual frame, we can fit information into it. If there's not a conceptual frame, everyone interprets specific information differently. So he wrote the book, Don't Think of an Elephant, as a way to illustrate that. So I don't want to get into his work too much now, but the other little piece of this that I want to mention before we go into the groups is there's quite a bit in the thinking chapter about the relationship between conceptual or abstract and specific or concrete. And a lot of what is valued in, I found, in the writing in academia, and maybe anywhere, is a writer's ability to link the conceptual and the specific, to link those things. And yeah, I can't, this looks interesting in the chat, but I'm not going to try to read it right now. How do we, and I found that in feedback groups, some readers get very excited about your words and phrases that are very conceptual, sort of a very abstract way of saying something. And other readers get very fascinated with the actual details of water rising in the along the coastline, or what a tree looks like, or something like that. And actually, the really skilled writers are able to bring these things together so that the concrete illustrates and supports and clarifies and exemplifies the abstract. And I found lots of writers more comfortable with the concrete or more comfortable with the abstract. But what we're trying to do is bring the two together. And I could talk a little bit more about that and have some, but I think we need to move on. And I'm just going to look at my note and see if there's one more thing that I wanted to mention here. No. Yeah, I think we've touched on something that anybody have a question that might clarify all of this? I think I'm talking too much and we need to get to work.
I think Jane had a list of folks. I think there were a few more people that had comments or questions.
Yes, okay, let's get them.
Yeah, I've contacted, I sent messages individually to anyone who had their hand up. Is there anyone who wants to?
Oh, good. Yeah, people withdrew their hands, but they might still
I'll go. I have my hand up and then I put it down. And what I was going to say is that I think I'm very aware of these different styles of writing, and I often make a decision or intentionally write a certain way just because a lot of what I do is out of rebellion, but but it's also out of creativity. Like, I like to play with words and different ways of, coming at something that's creative or that makes the person have a different experience with it. So I find that sometimes when I'm going to write something, especially if it isn't something that I'm feeling pressure to write because of a deadline, I make an intentional decision and see what I can do with it. So I don't think I thought of it in terms of like you showing the patterns, but I thought about, how can I come at this in a way that's going to be different than my gut reaction to do it, and how will that change the experience for the reader. And I do that a lot in short stories where I can think about, okay, when do I want to get to the point? How do I want to do that? Or do I want to do something totally out of the box? And so, yeah, it's fun to kind of intentionally decide how you're going to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. Very great.
I can go next, and I have a question. I changed my mind so many times, but I have a question, Louise, and that is of the framing. So the writing, as you mentioned, in other styles that is not the industrial growth society can allow for spaces where and for concepts that do not have to be framed. And so like you talked about like how we can tell stories and how we can go on tangentials and all of that. So my point is, in the industrial growth writing style, there's a lot that can be lost actually while we are writing. So how can we deal with that? How can we try to actually write what we want without trying to constrain everything in a framework? Because exploration is so good when one is writing.
This is such a profound question. I don't know if I have an answer for this. Maybe other people do. Well, my first thought is don't lose it. And in other words, keep a journal, because there will be a time when you'll be able to bring that out. Um, I'm in a different situation because I'm not in academia anymore, and I'm where I feel I want to use my writing, and we all know that it's the things that are left out of the standard model that are going to be able to help change the world right now. So they have to come out. And that's why I want to have some time at the end of the feedback groups to talk about other ways, other places to publish things. I had a very good experience in 2017 when the terrible fires came through here. The first batch of them came through this part of California. I guess I wrote this in 2018 when the second batch of them came through, but all the points that had come up in my research for my book. See, the indigenous people here knew how to take care of fire, and they did. And we wouldn't be in the situation of having these terrible fires if we were still using their practices instead of making them into criminal acts. And so I was feeling so passionate about this that I was able to write an opinion column for Yes Magazine that they published online. Yes Magazine, I'll talk about later. But anyway, it was passionate, I'll tell you, and it used everything I knew, from all the techniques and skills I knew from all my time of writing. It's really the best thing I've written ever. And they've republished it over and over again whenever there's another fire. And they titled it "How My Settler Ancestors Set Us Up for How My Settler Colonial Ancestors Set Us Up for Catastrophic Wildfire," which was, to me, the greatest wormy of the world. They found it. I didn't think of that title, but if I had been able to think of that title, I could not have thought of a better one. So it's not impossible. And I just encourage you and everybody, affirm the things that don't fit in, and keep thinking about how and where they will fit in and who will hear them, because sometimes the policymakers get this they're maybe making the policy right now, but who's electing them? There's a much larger consciousness that you can affect with your work. That's my only answer to this, but probably some of you have answers. There was another question.
No, I think we've made through the list that I had. So
Okay.
we're good to go.
I think we should go into the feedback groups, because they